Product safety, labor standards, environmental protection, privacy and security can all cause crisis. Leaders of organizations need to be well equipped with tools to combat such challenging situations. Such tools were introduced to us during Kellogg Week in a course entitled Strategic Crisis Management. Hi, my name is Arjun Chaudhary and welcome to Mission Happiness. Now, before we explore the different types of crisis and the high-level strategies of managing them, it is important to define what crisis is. A crisis is a decision that's both urgent and important. A decision implies conflict among stakeholders. Urgent implies speed is imperative, and important implies accuracy is imperative. There are 5 different types of crisis and different types of high-level strategies of managing them. Crisis type number 1, public opinion or reputational crisis. This is where the members of the public have had a negative experience or negative impact due to a particular product or service of an organization. For example, consumption of a particular pharmaceutical drug from a company has led to the death of a certain number of consumers. Now, the high-level strategy of managing this type of crisis would be to build trust with the public by rectifying the drug. Crisis type number 2, legal crisis. This is where an organization has been conducting operations in such a manner that it has been breaking existing laws knowingly. For example, a car company has been designing car engines for the last 10 years that has not been meeting emission regulations standards. Now, the way to manage this type of crisis would be is to build a case where the company really has to explain and justify why it did what it did. Crisis type number 3, legislative or government crisis. This is where existing laws have been changed that negatively impact a company and its users. Let's say, for example, an online company exists that allows homeowners to rent out their homes to members of the public for short-term stays. Now, suddenly, the provincial or state government passes a law that only limits these homeowners to rent out their homes in a given year for a maximum of 60 days. Now, the way to manage this type of crisis would be to build a coalition where the organization and its users form a coalition by joining with other parties and associations to form a bigger group to combat the body that initially changed the law. Crisis type number 4, regulatory crisis. This is where a law has been passed by a regulatory body which can be interpreted in 2 different ways by a particular company, thereby eventually leading to that company to be out of compliance or non-compliant with the regulatory body. Let's say, for example, an environmental regulatory body exists and it has passed a particular law. Now, a company can interpret that law in 2 different ways. Way number 1, which requires the company to invest more money and purchase equipment such as pollution abatement equipment. Interpretation number 2, which requires the company to invest less money, and it's a much simpler approach. Now, the company decided to take the simpler approach and invest less money, thereby eventually becoming out of compliance or non-compliant with the regulatory body. The way to manage this type of crisis would be to build trust by working closely with the regulatory body to come back into compliance, and perhaps work with the regulatory body to change the wordings in the law such that there's no room for misinterpretation in the future. 5th and final crisis type, health and safety crisis. This is where the health and safety of public is at risk. The way to manage this type of crisis would be to take care of people's health and safety. Now, in addition to learning about these different types of crisis and strategies of managing them, we were also provided in this course with a 3-step framework on how to manage any type of crisis. This three-step framework is identify, contain, and resolve. Identify is where you identify what type of crisis it is. What are the key issues, the key risks? What are the main stakeholders that are involved? Contain is more short-term in nature, where you implement protocols to attain certain outcomes in the short term. Resolve is more long-term in nature, where you really do a root cause analysis and investigate deep into the matter as to why exactly did the crisis happen in the first place, and then you change processes and systems and strategy in your organization and validate that with testing such that this crisis is not repeated in the future. Remember, happiness is the key to success. I'm Arjun Chaudhary.